Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful Rabbit Hole, Lore and Frey, and the upcoming Jaw the Dragon. Well, in days past, I released a glowing review of Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. To this day, I really love and admire the game and what it did for me from a creative perspective, as a platformer, as a PlayStation exclusive. I've always been a big fan of Sly One, and so much so that upon my most recent playthrough of the game, I immediately got started on Sly Two. I was hyped going back into this because it had been a long time, about a decade, since I had last seriously tried to play this. So I was really looking forward to seeing what Sly 2 had in store for me. And for the first couple of levels or so, I was very impressed. Sly 2 seems like a radical improvement over the original in a number of ways. Like the animations are better, the levels are bigger and more spaced out. There are more interesting mission objectives. The story is better. You have all these like really positive attributes that really give the impression that Sly 2 is a much better game. However, as you go through the game, as you experience the game and everything it has to offer, a very glaring begins to surface. Something that plagues, I think, most PlayStation exclusives, especially in modern day. I feel that the game is simply not all that much fun. Like when you get right down to it, the game has great sound effects, great music, great plot lines. It really grows the original the original characters in new and interesting and innovative ways up to like the climactic finish. But when you really get right down to it, when you really get down to brass tacks, the game is not all that much fun for the most part. Now, though, of course, I'm not saying that like every mission is completely worthless or that like every decision made was a misstep, because I think the decision here to make the game more open-ended, to give you like an open environment to run around in, giving you like multiple playable characters, giving you like a variety of mission objectives you could tackle any time in order to like build up to like a climactic finish in which you pull off a big heist. Like I think the idea of that was actually very sound, very well put together. Like as I mentioned, the presentation is just phenomenal. But like when you get down to the actual mechanics of what you're doing, like the levels feel like they're designed for Sly's use, right? You're still like going around climbing on things, running on rails. Like it feels like the game, the levels are a raccoon's playground, essentially. So whenever you switch over to Bentley and Murray, there's this very real feeling that the game is very limited in what you can accomplish. Like all Murray can do really is run around punching people, and all Bentley can hope to do is like shoot people with sleep darts and maybe bomb them, and that gets old really quickly. You have like this wide range of situations you get into, from like hacking computers to stealing objects, but like as you go through the game, you start encountering the same situations over and over and over again, and it just gets very tiresome. The combat is simplistic. The stealth is very simple, like is very brain dead. Like the AI is just incredibly subpar. Like escaping the bigger guards in this game is as simple as like jumping onto a rooftop and then they'll leave you alone, right? Minor enemies are not really a threat. Like you have this very well put together game with like fun, unique environments, a cool, interesting premise. The usage of making the clockwork parts the objects that you have to like steal from the criminals, using them for nefarious deeds, is genius. Far more brilliant than you would have expected from this series, where it felt like it was building up to simply utilizing the villain from the original again, like making him come back. It feels like the game is so creative in certain aspects, but purely from a presentation standpoint, purely from a storytelling standpoint, like the game wants to tell you a story instead of actually making a fun game. When you get right down to it, there are so many missions in this game that just feel like they're just padding, that just feel completely superfluous, that just feel not fun at all. Like, all I really want to do is play more Thievius Raccoonus. Like, all I really want to do is just get into more situations, playing as Sly, stealing things from my enemies. Like, I think Thievius Raccoonus, what I would have wanted, ideally, from a sequel to Thievius Raccoonus is, like, take Sly and give him a sequel. Give him new crazy powers, new situations to weasel his way out of, new enemies to go up against. Like, they had a really good formula with the first game, but with the second, they stripped away everything that made like Sly fun from like overcomplicating the combat and the situation. Like they did something completely different from the original, and in essence, kind of lost what made the original any any fun at all. Like instead of doing what the original did and doing it better, they went in a wildly different direction with mixed results. And this is a very negative review, but I really need to emphasize this. Slide 2 is not without merit. Absolutely not. Because I think my love for Sly 1 is coming from like a sense of my belief in like a less is more approach. I think Sly One has a lot of mystique. I think the fact that like characters like Clockwork can leave such an impact on you despite having like only a handful of lives is really effective storytelling in its own way. However, with Sly 2, with its more grand scale, you really do get like more of a feel for like the characters and their relationships and their dynamics. Like I don't like Bentley and Murray as characters. I think they're boring. I think they're not fun to play as. I think they kind of get in the way of what I think the game should be about, Sly Cooper. But there is no denying that the developers went to great lengths to making sure that they played a great role, not only in the story, but in the gameplay segments. That both of them are playable. They all have their own interesting, own unique move sets. They all have their own missions they can go on. And like the game really gives them moments to shine. Murray has his own boss. Like they both have boss fights of their own. They they all have their they all like help Sly on his like objective to collect all the clockwork parts. And it's not what I would have done personally. I would have like doubled down on like the whole making them be the sidekick thing. And like have the Sly be the start of the show, but like this clearly takes a lot of influences from heist based media, like from things like that, where, the camaraderie, like, again, like, you can see what they're trying to do with this. And it doesn't work well from a gameplay perspective, but, like, from a storytelling perspective, the game is a lot of fun. The first game had a lot of fun, interesting villains. Like, they had great designs, they had reasonably good voice acting, they had interesting locations, and 2 really doubles down on that. In fact, I would say one of the best things about 2, one of the things that really makes me appreciate the game for what it is, despite my like negative view of it, is the story. The game does take goes to surprisingly dark places with surprising twists and turns, with betrayals, with revelations, with interesting set pieces and resolutions to the plot. Like the ending in particular is surprisingly brutal for a game like this. Probably one of the most brutal. Uh, Endings to a mascot platformer I'm aware of, right? I was very surprised when I saw the ending for the first time. And I think it's more impactful than something like Conker's Bad Fur Day because the entire game was building up to this ending as opposed to Conker's where it just kind of comes out of nowhere. I think I think Sly I think Sly 2 was absolutely one of those PlayStation games that really thought that it could sell itself on the story. There is no real challenge to any of these missions, right? Like I noticed when I was playing these that like I would die in certain situations, and then it would set me right back where I was before. And then I would just have to do a trivial task over again or what have you. So many missions in this game are just you going to a place and then like pressing a button and something happens. And it's just not fun, unfortunately. And it's such a shame too. I do think that like a lot of times I find myself really wishing the game was more fun because I do actually like the story a lot. I think I will always defend Sly 2 on that front, in that like the game does have like great, interesting, fun villains. I remember in the second stage, the Indian stage, where you're in the city, like going around, like dancing in front of Rajan. Like he actually compliments you to Jean Bazan, like, oh, that fellow is graceful, and you can see him like staring at you as you're dancing with Carmelita. Like he's someone that appreciates dance. Like it's such a ridiculous concept for like such a brutal villain, but he really does come off like someone who appreciates the culture of like a high society and stuff like that. Someone who really values what he has. It's an interesting character trait. It makes the character like relatable and interesting and things like that. It makes you feel invested in what's going on. And unfortunately, moments like that like slowly start tapering off as the game goes on. I think by stage even by the next stage, the three, like the missions become less interesting, and you get less and less like instances with the antagonists. You just get like more and more of these like contrived situations that just don't that are creative and fun and have like you know like c- come off as if they put a lot of thought into them, but at the same time, like, are they entertaining gameplay experiences? Is this something that like that's actually fun to play, as opposed to like watching you play out like a cartoon? And the answer is no. Usually, whenever I play this, I get this sensation that like. Like these characters are complex. They have a lot going on. I enjoy them a lot. I care about them a lot, but I don't like playing as them. I don't like going through the motions of like preparing for the heist, because usually the big heist isn't really all that fun. And it's such a shame too. I really, every time I play Slide 1, every time I do the same thing. Like this isn't the first time I've done this. This is typical for me when it comes to PlayStation games. I do this with Kingdom Hearts as well. I immediately boot up the sequel. I get really fired up about, getting back into like this game I hadn't played in a long time, like really appreciating the sequel for what it is, really trying to love, the game in spite of like all the problems that I remember it has. And for the first couple of hours or so, I'm like completely in love with it. Like it's one of my favorite things ever. I even to this day, I'll still defend like the opening chapters of Kingdom Hearts 2 as being one of the most suspenseful, heart wrenching segments in all of video games. But now it's like eventually what happens is that like every single time like the cracks just kind of start to show, and every single time, I think the past several times I've tried to play Sly 2 or Kingdom Hearts 2, like it results in the same thing where I just eventually just stop playing. Like I eventually just lose all enthusiasm because the game, just in spite of like what I want it to be, just can't live up to the original. It just is not good as the original release. And it's really unfortunate for me to say that, because for a while there, I was really, really fired up about Sply 2. I really, really thought for a while that this game might might actually win me over more than the original. But you know, it's all story, no gameplay. It is a very, very strong example of everything wrong with PlayStation exclusives.